So this video, like all my videos, will take me a little while to get to the point. But the inspiration was the pec tear situation that happened at regionals. I'm not going to address that. I'm not going to talk about it too much. Honestly, I don't think I can do it objectively anymore because I've seen and heard so many people come out and make videos about it. And everybody is so sure that they understand why all the pec tear situations are happening. And it honestly makes me really angry when people have singular perspectives and when they provide answers to situations that are complicated. So just some of the stuff that I've heard, a lot of people that haven't made it are convinced that it's a steroid problem and that people are hypertrophying in the muscle tissue and then the tendon junction is too weak to support what the muscle can do and that's why they're tearing. So only people on juice are tearing, which just is silly as a blanket statement. I've heard strength coaches say that people are too weak to handle the forces and they need to be doing more speed bench and they need to be doing more weighted dips. And again, it's just incomplete. Maybe it's true, but most likely those people make money off of getting people stronger according to their definition of strength. So it's an easy way to describe it. From gymnastics experts, people don't have shoulder extension strength, people don't have ring stabilization strength, people don't do enough ring dips in training, from coaches who are scientific, this sport is stupid and there's too much stress in the sport on the shoulder girdle, the programming was stupid, it's Dave Castro's fault. From PTs, people aren't doing enough mobility or soft tissue work in the off season. From athletes who are currently in the game, they're okay with the injury risk and it's part of sport. And from athletes who are in some ways burned by the game, they think, that's why the sport's stupid and I'm glad I'm done with it. So I've heard all of those arguments. Now, I'm not going to address any of it any more than that. The truth to me is much more complicated, and all of those are in part true. What I did want to address is what does that mean regarding my athletes moving forward? Well, the first thing is that the movement preparation that gets done now on the shoulder girdle needs to get even more intense. So I do a ton of preparation for people's shoulder extension strength, for the scapula to elevate, retract, protract, depress, and have full control of the shoulder girdle. Now, that is insanely difficult to do in a sport like CrossFit that overly taxes the internal rotators with kipping and burpees and toes to bar and does a lot of barbell work and a lot of lat strengthening work. And it's really hard to build structural balance in the shoulder girdle when people are hypertrophying and growing from all of those training disciplines. So in order to counteract that, we just need to attack more and more and more the shoulder girdle to make sure it's strong enough in the future to handle maximal effort, speed, ring dips in a 4-time setting. It is what it is. People can complain about it, but if you're in a sport and somebody says this are the demands of the sport, then the goal of the training process is to create a training protocol that allows the athlete to safely attack that movement without thinking that they're going to be hurt. So that's number one. Number two is I'm going to continue to have the dialogue with my athletes that they are putting themselves at risk by taking part in a sport. I have that discussion if I'm helping MMA athletes, if I'm sending people to the NFL, if people are body composition athletes and are getting down to really excessively low levels of body fat. All of those are consequences of performance on the human body. So I need to continue to have that dialogue. And then I think from a training perspective, I need to be a little bit more aware of overloading a specific joint over multiple workouts over multiple days. So when I typically create my training designs, I'll be mindful of like, okay, well, this day had 200 contractions on the shoulder girdle and 2 workouts that tax the shoulder girdle. So I'm going to take it a little bit easy on the next day and maybe overload the legs or, do some hard swim intervals or do something that's a little bit lower tension so that there's not as much mechanical stress and compression and shear force stress on the actual joints. Now, I learned my lesson in the past by being too conservative. So I would make my athletic designs for the sport of CrossFit too safe. And then they'd show up to competitions and be like, well, I've never snatched before at over 225 after doing 100 chest to bar pull-ups in the morning session. And that's a fair criticism of a design structure. So I have slowly prepared my athletes to deal with more aggressive testing parameters. Now, this year, every workout taxed the shoulder girdle. The first one had chest to bars and handstand push-ups with a weighted vest, which will change the contraction pattern of the scapula and probably just, your body gets used to doing gymnastics with its current body weight. So all the stabilization structures when they're upside down or hanging from a bar are built to tolerate your body weight. So when you say, okay, now do it as fast as possible plus 20 pounds, it changes the nature of the stress on the shoulder girdle. Then obviously the ring dips and the single arm overhead stabilization of the power snatch in workout 2. In workout 3, there's rope climbs, single arm overhead walking lunges, and wall balls, which all tax the shoulder girdle pretty heavily. In workout 4, the single arm deadlift, the handstand walk, and the toes to bar all attack the shoulder girdle. Workout 5 was 45 muscle ups, all shoulder girdle. And then to finish it off, a little bit less shoulder stress, but burpees still do target the pec. So all the preparatory work leading into regionals was very shoulder dominated, and then all the testing is very shoulder dominant. So I need to be more cognizant of that in the future, that even though I can't really train like that all year round and hope my athletes have longevity, they might be tested that way, so I need to prepare for that. So that's all I really have to say about the pec tears. Maybe we put some other stuff out or have a discussion about it in the future, but I think that's enough to kind of put it at bed. There's enough info out there on the internet. But what this was really supposed to do for me was to lead to a bigger discussion of health and performance. And I perceive there to be a little bit of a disconnect in the market, because I think it's because the sport world has kind of gotten integrated into the health and wellness market, and there's a lot of warring among those two things, and then the sports science and the sport world are kind of at war with one another. So I wanted to kind of bring those two communities together, give a different perspective, redefine health, and give some ideas as to what I think needs to happen in the health and fitness community moving forward in the future. So the reality that people need to understand is that people are always going to be willing to ruin their bodies to obtain something, whether that's money, fame, sexual attention, respect, self-confidence. They're always going to be willing to do that, probably from now until the end of time. It is just part of the nature of life. And I think sometimes people who are educated about physical training think that everybody is logical to the point that they would do no harm to their bodies in the pursuit of their own fitness, which I think is false. So for me, I think probably the biggest health detriment, I've had multiple surgeries, multiple herniated discs, multiple broken bones, multiple concussions, and I think I've had a lot of bad things that happened to my body as a result of sports, but the worst was probably what happened with regards to weight cutting and wrestling. So I play football at 245 or 250 pounds and then wrestle at 215. And then when I went and did some MMA stuff after college, it would be cutting to 205 or 185, which is a big cut at my natural weight of anywhere from 230 to 250, depending on what I'm doing with my nutrition. So at the time, we had horrible training protocols for that. We would just basically eat nothing, train all the time, put sauna suits on and get into saunas and bike until the weight was off, weigh in, and drink Pedialyte to get back to weight. And we would do that for multiple tournaments all season. We would train tired all the time. The endurance stuff that we were doing in an underfed state didn't change. And as a result of doing that and becoming a pretty good wrestler, I destroyed some of my hormones. And now, looking at what coaching does for that and what it does for MMA, there's, intelligent science that governs it. It's done for one day usually. There's metrics that they take on athletes prior to allow them to pick appropriate minimum weight classes that they can get to. There's dehydration and rehydration protocols. athletes are tested, and all of these things help to create a safer environment for people to be able to push themselves. However, there's still going to be, in the nature of pushing to maximal level of performance, some inherent risk, and people are willing to take that risk. I've seen women destroy their hormones to get lean and either be fitness models or because somebody told them they were fat when they were younger and they tried to lose weight. I've seen men destroy their joints layering too much muscle on small frames, either with the use of synthetics or just by over consuming for their frame and doing so much strength work and never doing movement work and aerobic training. I've seen athletes in the NFL that were completely destroyed from a joint and a brain perspective. I've seen endurance athletes that have cardiac scarring and cardiac issues. I've seen ex-bodybuilders who are destroyed hormonally from the anabolics they've taken. And I'm sure in CrossFit, there's going to be consequences of pushing yourself to maximal levels of performance, but we don't know yet what they are. We don't really yet know what we're training for in the sport. It's, might be a combination of joint health, endocrine health. There's going to be some consequence, but probably less than other sports because there's just more training knowledge in this sport than a lot of the other sports that at the time of their development. So if we know that that's the case, if we know people are willing to push their bodies and push past a certain goal, then the question becomes, what is health? Are all of these people, when they're performing, unhealthy? Is sport inherently unhealthy on your body? And I wrestled with this for a really long time after I finished my athletic career and after I said, I'm going to be a full-time coach. I really went on a pursuit to try to figure out what health meant. And I know some of my academic friends would always reiterate this mantra, good performance starts where good health ends. And it's stuck in my brain for years. And I constantly thought, I don't need to push myself to that place that I used to go because that's unhealthy. I need to operate within my comfort zone because that's healthy. And I slowly started getting softer and softer and more mentally weak with regards to training, because if you're not pushing your body to an adaptive level and not pushing past your comfort zone, you don't then create the perception that there's a stress and then therefore don't create an adaptation. So it started really frustrating me because I'm like, well, this definition of health just has to be wrong. It has to be incomplete. There has to be some level of stress and adversity that you can push your body through to create an adaptation moving forward, a stronger body, a stronger mind. And I went through the process of trying to basically rebuild myself as an athlete, but without an athletic goal. And the current definition of health from the dictionary is a person's mental or physical condition. Now, that's fucking so ambiguous, and it's not helpful. It doesn't tell us anything about how to measure it, how to look for it in other people, how to model ourselves after it. And I've heard people all the time say things like, oh, I'm healthy, or I eat healthy, or, oh man, that person looks so healthy. And I think a lot of times they come from very non-questioned, very ignorant perspectives. I don't mean ignorant in a negative way. I mean ignorant in not taking into consideration all of the variables that are comprising the word health. So I really genuinely think as a fitness community, we need to redefine the word. And that's what this video is all about. I know it took me a while to get to that point to try to explain it, but I don't have a concrete definition yet. I just have principles that guide what health means for me and what it means for the community that trusts me as a coach, and what I try to challenge my coaches and athletes to do while they're pushing themselves. So, principle one, health is not static. It always is something that I am trying to take action to do. You're always given choices in life. And you can choose to act in a way that supports and promotes your definition of health, or you can choose to make decisions that undermine your definition of health. And there are going to be circumstances in life that are thrown at you that challenge your definition of health. So, you might find out you have cancer, or you find out somebody dies in the family, and it totally undermines your psychology and creates so many stress hormones and totally fucks your body up. And it's going to undermine all of the things that you think that define a healthy person. And because so much of it is out of my control, accepting that it's an always process-oriented mind state and not a fixed mind state that I'm ever going to obtain has helped me stay on track and continue to grind. All right, so number 2, it has more to do with purpose, meaning, and emotions than it has to do with my physical body. And I came to this epiphany when I was reading research on people who became paraplegics and quadriplegics, in that at the end of, I think it was a 1-year time frame, they took those people after, like right after the incidents happened and a year later, and in that period of time, they were happier than their counterparts who were people that won the lottery. So people who won the lottery, I think it was a year later, were less happy than people who were paraplegics as a result of some sort of traumatic injury. And that just blew my mind. I know that might be a little bit judgmental or stereotypical, but it was really important for me to separate the concept of health solely from the body. And that is also something that's not really talked about in the fitness community, because we use bodily images, pictures, leanness values to dictate health, which I think is a problem. For me, my purpose and meaning is my business, my training, the people that I love, my colleagues, the professionals that push me, my athletes, and all of that helps to support and promote my health and me feeling like I have something important to do on a day-to-day basis, which is much more important to me than the obsession that I had in my earlier athletic quests with purely my body. So to recap those two: health, it's not static and it's always a process. And 2, it has more to do with meaning and purpose than it has to do with my body. 3, it has to be relationship centric. So if you want to push your body to the maximal level and be an athlete, people will say that it's a selfish quest. But if you want to go far as an athlete, you're going to need a support structure. You're going to need somebody that loves you no matter what after the competition. If you fail, you need a coach or some sort of support group of coaches. You're going to need PTs, massage therapists. You're going to need other competitors. You're going to need the governing body of the competition that is put on. And all of those relationships to me are a much more important construct, or a much more important input to health than solely whether or not you win and lose. 4, this one's for my body. And I just want to caveat this, that I treat my body differently than some of my athletes, different than some of my coaches. I have a different perspective on what I want my body to do. So this is what my definition of health is from a bodily perspective. I think the 3 that I just talked about before apply universally, but this 4th one for me is, it's simple. At every stage of my life, I want to be able to do what I want to do physically. So right now, I want to pursue martial arts again. I want to move heavy barbells without pain. I want to challenge my large body to do complex gymnastic skills as a representation of my understanding of movement. I want to be able to do CrossFit workouts with my athletes and challenge them in some of the shorter non-body weight based stuff because it's fun to compete. I want to be able to sprint and change direction well again because I think that's a big marker of athleticism. I want to refine my ability to express fitness, swimming, biking, and just moving around in the world. And as I do all of that, I want to make sure that I maintain as pain-free of an existence as I can. I know in the past, I pushed my body into just horrible levels of joint pain, and it's not something that I think is necessary anymore. And maybe never is necessary. So that's what I want to do with my body. Now, that's a really hard thing to measure. So what I take into consideration when I do that, or when I'm coaching athletes, are 4 major things. The first is hormones. Now, unless you have the money or the resources and the doctors who understand well enough to do this and can get blood work on a bi-weekly basis, you're probably not going to get enough blood work to give you an accurate representation. So what I try to do is use energy levels, digestive health, sex drive, and appetite as proxies for people's emotional state. And I track those over time, and I track those in myself. There's resources online you can find about poop, making sure you wake up and you're hungry and that you're excited to actually eat food and fuel yourself for your activities, and waking up or desiring to physically connect with another human being. And all of those are important metrics or subjective markers to tell you that your hormones are probably in a pretty good state. Now, if you want to know accurately whether they are, you need a doctor to do that, but most people don't have the money and the resources in the current insurance landscape to do that. Second would be movement quality. So that's very hard to measure, but it's measured by observing flaws and changes in movements. Tiny, tiny details, like somebody used to land flat-footed when they snatch, now all of a sudden their right foot's starting to come up a little bit onto their toe and their knees starting to deviate in. So what created that change? What tightness or restriction or what pain is their body trying to subconsciously protect them from? Fluidity of motion, stiffness, breathing patterns, and then lastly is joint pain. So all of those kind of get wrapped up into movement quality. Then third is performance metrics. So whatever gets somebody up in the morning, whether they feel fat and want to lean out, they feel weak and want to get stronger, they feel stiff and immobile and want to get better at gymnastics, whatever they want to do and they're fired up to do physically, getting some sort of metrics to say that they're moving in the right direction and progressing. And last would be body composition. So that's a topic for another day, and it's really probably going to be an entire video in and of itself, but the body composition that somebody desires should suit their goal. A lot of people go too far and they want to be too lean for whatever their athletic goal is, or they're trying to get big and strong and so they put on too much body fat, or they're naturally a bigger, thicker human being and they try to fight that too much and undermine their health by getting too lean. That's kind of a process of self-exploration that I think needs to have some flux throughout the year, where people are playing with, okay, how much fuel do I need for this activity? What's the overall goal of my training structure? What am I doing in my life? How often do I want to go out to eat and just enjoy myself with food? How often am I eating with my family versus eating for fueling as a purely training investment based meal? And all of those things kind of go into what the body composition of a person should look like at any given point in time. I don't think there's an ideal. I don't think there can be a static, okay, I've obtained it, now I'm going to maintain it, because the body is always in flux. But those four variables for me are going to give me a representation of whether or not my body's healthy at any point in time. All right, so I blabbed my mouth and I'm basically done with the argument of trying to explain what commonly people refer to as health, what I've seen in regards to my own body and own experience, what I've seen with regards to athletes. What I really wanted to get from like a what's the point perspective is that if you have a definition of health that is comprehensive like that, you're never really making sacrifices to your health for performance. Instead of performance being the point at which good health ends and good performance starts in your climb, it's more that performance is the tip of the pyramid or the tip of the spear, of which the base is your health. And I think if we can strive to have that, we can start to reconcile some of the discrepancies of the academic community that wants to pad the walls of training society and not let anyone take risks or go hard, or who say CrossFit is bad or football is bad and we should stop contact sports, or MMA is brutal and gruesome. And then we can reconcile that group of people with the other people that understand how much value can come from sports. That weekend at the Atlantic Regional, and watching Travis come out in the final workout and win to secure his qualification, and Noah having basically overcame a pec tear to win the regional in a pretty dominant fashion, and the team almost qualifying and having Caroline Dardini take 6th and Brianna take 9th, and having the disappointments of some of my other athletes who finished still in very respectable places in a really difficult region, and having all of those emotional ups and downs created such a profound growth opportunity for me. And I was so fired up for the future and what that meant for my business and what that represented for these videos and what this represented for those athletes' future careers and who they'll be able to touch in the future. And if I were to give that up or tell athletes that it's not worth it to risk a pec tear for your future, we'd be basically saying that there's nothing that you can learn from life in sports. And I think anybody who's dedicated their life to either preparing people for sports or competing in sports knows that that's just not true. So what I wanted to do here was stop some of the conflict about how it's such a bad thing that people are getting hurt. Yeah, we don't want people to get hurt, but sports are dangerous, but also within that danger is an awesome growth opportunity, and not everybody with their training needs to train for that. If everybody defines what health is for themselves along some sort of a guideline that I laid out and understands what they want out of their body, then they can perform at the highest level and have some longevity and decide when's the appropriate time to pull themselves out. So I guess the conclusion is redefine health.